So, should I start or is someone gonna do the introductions?
I will. Good morning, dear attendees. BioAcCES session will start now with Robert Fernandez. He was born in Lima, Peru, grew up in New York, and he graduated from community college. After that, he completed his bachelor degree in science in biotechnology in Caney York College. He is passionate about STEM outreach and mentoring underrepresented students. He followed his PhD in molecular biophysics and biochemistry at Yale University, and he is currently a postdoctoral research at Columbia University. So, thank you.
Thank you. So I'm very happy to be here today to talk about the grad school application process. So just a little brief summary. So when I actually applied to graduate programs in the United States, I mostly applied to programs in biochemistry, molecular biology, and these are just some of the schools that I applied to, just so you have an overview. I did take the GRE twice, and I personally received 5 interviews out of the 9 programs I had applied to, and 4 offers were extended. So just saying that it's good to apply to like several different schools as well. So in terms of the grad school application process, let's start off with what is a PhD program in the science. So PhD program in the science, the good thing is that a PhD program in the sciences is free at least. University pays you your tuition, provides you a stipend and health insurance. And why exactly pursue a PhD degree? In addition to gaining research experience in your field of interest, to build towards your future career, you learn how to think like an independent scientist, you develop critical planning, executing and communication skills. But nowadays, a PhD is no longer just for, I wouldn't be an academic professor. A PhD program is actually, I like to think of it like, it's kind of like college in a way where you pursue different careers. For example, I've known several PhD candidates who went on to not just academia, but they worked in biotechnology, consulting, science communication, science policy, government work, and some even went to med school afterwards. And later on, if you're interested in specifically the PhD program at Rockefeller, I know they provide a very great stipend, and we'll chat about the key contact you can talk to if you're interested in Rockefeller as a PhD program later on. But in terms of your PhD experience, at least I can only speak from my experience in the Yale Molecular Biophysics and Biochemistry department. Your first year is normally where you do 2 to 3 rotations, where you pretty much work in a research lab for 6 to 8 weeks to see if you like your the research environment, the type of research you're doing, the mentor, and then you do this 2 more times. And then after that, you join a particular thesis lab. So after your rotations, you're also taking grad school classes as well your first year, depending on the program. This could go up to your second year. And then after that, you have qualification exams. For the most part, they're just like a written or oral examination on your thesis in order for you to advance the candidacy. Depending on the PhD program, some schools require you to teach. For example, at Yale, we have a 1-year requirement for teaching, while other programs are required to teach. For example, Rockefeller does not. And then after pretty much qualifying exams, you just pretty much do research until you graduate. That's just kind of like an overview of your PhD process, at least in the biological sciences. So how exactly do you choose a PhD program? So there are several different factors. One of them being choosing a program related to your academic major or research field as a college student. For example, if you study biochemistry, geology, mechanical engineering, and you build up coursework in that field, as an undergraduate, you may want to apply to graduate studies in that field. But let's say you're not applying, like you're switching fields. For example, as a college student, you majored in developmental biology, but you're interested in neuroscience PhD programs just because that's the type of research you were doing during your time as an undergraduate student. And if that's the case, then one idea definitely would be let's definitely fine. That does happen. But make sure you take the proper coursework required for like neuroscience PhD programs, just so you're a competitive candidate. So for example, when I applied to like a biochemistry, biophysics, and structural biology program at Yale, but I was coming from a basic biotechnology background. And I knew other people who came from like a genetics, a physics, a mathematics background. So it's totally fine to switch fields as long as you take the required coursework. Uh, when you're choosing a PhD program, another thing to keep in mind are looking into research laboratories. Ideally, you want to choose at least a program that has 5 professors that you're interested in working with. Just because at least for the biological sciences, just because this varies a lot for other fields like ecology and evolutionary biology, computer science, and psychology, where you kind of have to contact a PI ahead of time to see if they have space for you as an applicant. But at least for the biological sciences, you ideally want to apply to programs where you find at least 5 professors that you're interested in working with. It's because sometimes if you join a program and you just want to work with one particular professor, sometimes it's not necessarily guaranteed. They may not have space in their lab, there might not be enough funding, or they might be away on sabbatical. So it's definitely a good idea to choose programs where you have several professors that you're interested in working with. And then other factors into how you choose a PhD program. Depending on the program, there are some PhD programs that have special programs within their PhD program or resources specific for the university. For example, there are cases where some programs may have biotechnology internships. Some may allow you to edit medical school classes. Some have dual degree opportunities like a PhD MBA or a PhD JD. And some have career development programs. Once again, if teaching is a passion of yours, you might want to choose a program that allows you to teach. Or if you just want to focus on your research, you may want to choose programs that aren't requiring you to teach. And depending on a PhD program, you are mostly required to teach for a year, at least at Yale. And depending on a university and a PhD program, some universities pay you more if you continue to teach beyond your required 1 year. Another factor is location and graduate community. So you want to find a place where you're going to be happy, just because you're going to be there for 5 to 6 years. So you want to make sure this is somewhere where you can see yourself for the long term. And ideally, you want to have a place that has supportive, diverse communities, not just in your program, but among the campus or the city or location of the school. One of the important factors, at least for me, is diversity, and ideally having well-established resources for 100% of minorities to strive in. For example, I know that Rockefeller has a very strong, diverse group, and they have outreach programs like RiSI, and when you're applying to these grad schools and specifically PhD programs, you might want to go to the university website and see, beyond the science and the coursework requirements, what are the student groups there? Are there any student groups for underrepresented students? Even reach out to current grad students in the 3rd or 4th year. What is that environment like? What is that lab like? You can make a very well-informed choice in choosing a PhD program. But when it comes to diversity, there might be cases where you might be one of the few underrepresented students in your program and school, and that might happen depending on where you decide to apply. But in that case, this could be a chance for you to start your own outreach initiatives and build something that can help other underrepresented students like you in the future. And lastly, how do you choose a good research mentor? So when you're choosing professors to work with, ideally you want to have a good role model who has a solid training of graduate students. Most PIs on their webpage, they have information on where are the grad students now. Did they go into academia, biotech, other type of careers? Definitely reach out to older grad students to see if the PI was supportive of the alternative careers. Some things that might be interesting of you was the PI supportive? Was the PI leader or a rising leader in the field? How collaborative and supportive in the environment? You get along with the different lab members? Do they often publish with each other as co-authors? What is the publication track record like overall in the professor's lab? And ideally, which might be a little bit more rare. Are these professors or chapter a champion of diversity? Are they in a similar ethnicity or gender as you, so they could relate to your struggle? It's a little bit more rare, but these are just some of the different factors you might want to consider when choosing a research mentor. So how many PhD programs do you apply for exactly? So ideally, you want to apply to as many PhD programs that you see yourself interviewing and having a virtual visit for. Remember, read about every PhD program, look at what they have to offer, talk to different grad students in those programs. And unfortunately, a lot of these programs, their application costs are anywhere from $70 to $120. So at times, fee waivers are available at these virtual conferences, Aricam and Sagnis, sometimes on the program websites, or sometimes you just have to email the program director to see if you qualify for a fee waiver. But when applying to PhD programs, this is just one approach of how you could choose a particular program. Like when I applied, I at least chose 5 programs that I consider excellent, 4 that were good, and 3 that were my safety, all of which I could actually see myself going to, and the research interest was interest of to me. Like that necessarily don't apply to a PhD program for the purpose of you just want to be in a PhD program. You want to make sure that the research and the professors that you're working with is something that you will be interested in. Great. So how exactly do you apply for one? So because of the coronavirus, just keep in mind when it comes to the GREs that a lot of the GRE subject tests that were scheduled for October 17 have been canceled. So for the most part, a lot of PhD programs should be understanding of this, considering that you cannot take the subject test. But in terms of the general GREs, which depending on the university, they have it as optional. In short, what is a GRE? So it's a graduate record examination. It's a 4-hour exam required for admission in some grad schools. And as I mentioned, some schools have different GRE general test or subject requirements. These are just 2 websites, the GREnotrequired.com or biogre.info, of programs that have dropped the GREs, and not just biomedical programs, but they have short psychology, public health, and other type of PhD programs. But in short, the general test is roughly $205, and you have to send like roughly $27 per school report. But once again, because of COVID-19, a lot of universities, they're either making it optional, they're not requiring it. So if you're unsure, definitely feel free to reach out to your program that you're applying to, just to make sure like you need to take the GREs or not. And because of COVID-19, you could take the GRE pretty much from home, but keep in mind this only applies for a specific type of software. I think you cannot take it with Linux. Something only with Macs and PC. So in terms of breaking down the GRE scores, the GRE is composed of a verbal, quantitative, and analytical writing section. So both the verbal and the quantitative is just math, section ranges from 130 to 170. And the writing section is anywhere from 0 to 6. So on average, you at least want to have a round of 155 on the verbal and the quantitative section. And I personally think anything above a 160 is considered great. When I personally applied, I had 155 for both. But if you decide to take the GREs, ideally, you want to make sure that you have at least a 155. And even if it's optional, only submit the GREs if you have a really high score. Because even though it's optional, if you submit it, they're going to weigh it with everything else in your application. And if you're an international student, and then just one more thing, the GREs are good for 5 years. And if you're an international student, you may be required to take the TOEFL. And unfortunately, these scores are only valid for 2 years. And depending on your university, the TOEFL may be required or it may be waived. Once again, this is something that you need to contact your university in order to figure out whether they're waiving the TOEFL, is it required? And this is just like a simple guide as to whether you are needed to take the TOEFL or not. And these are just some open access resources online. If you just type in PhD TOEFL list, this is available online. But in terms of the grad school application, we're now in October. So if you are applying this cycle, hopefully by now you already have a list of the PhD programs that you're interested in. And keep in mind the deadlines and the requirements for each program. The deadline should roughly be the same, December 1st. Some vary and have moved to later in December, but just it really helps you just have like an Excel sheet, keeping track of all of the programs, all of the deadlines, all of the requirements. For example, do they require a personal statement, a diversity statement, GREs, any course requirements, how many letters of recommendations, do they want a CV, do they want an unofficial or official transcript, how long are the personal statements, is it 500 words, 1500 words? So every PhD program is different. So you just want to make sure you keep track of all those different details. Now, once again, it definitely doesn't hurt to reach out to some programs about fee waivers. And even now, there are some programs because of COVID-19 that are just waiving their application costs, which are free to apply. And definitely you want to get started on that personal statement. Don't worry about writing like a nice story right now. First, just have something ready. That way, like don't aim for like the 500 word max right now. Start off with like, okay, here are 2 pages of my personal statement, and then as your foundation of your personal statement, and then you can truncate accordingly. And also for PhD programs, you need letters of recommendations. And ideally, you want strong letters of recommendations from research or general mentors who have seen you grow as a professional and as a person. They want to highlight that you have the qualities to succeed in grad school. You do not want to ask a letter of recommendation from a professor who does not know you that well. For example, someone who you only took 1 class with and you were 1 in a class of 100. And that just because these letter recommendations are very important and sometimes make all the difference in these applications. So as you're progressing towards the end of October, definitely check out other grad school fellowships that you could apply for, such as like the NSF GRP, like the Polynesia Soros Fellowship, the GEM Fellowship, the Ford Foundation Fellowship. You definitely want to have several people look over your personal statement, whether they're professors, grad students, even other people applying at the same time as you. The more eyes, the better. And definitely, the easier you make it for your professors, the better when it comes to applying to grad school. Just because like professors are very busy and sometimes they miss a lot of emails. So if you just share your Excel sheet, these are all the programs I'm applying to, these are all the deadlines. That way they know okay, how many programs to expect, how many letters I'm going to need to write for them. And then if possible, try to attend these virtual conferences. However, if you're applying to programs in ecology and evolutionary biology, computer psychology, definitely start contacting professors you are interested in working with. It's because the application process varies a lot for these. And if you don't find a specific mentor, it's very difficult to get accepted into those PhD programs just because they require you to have at least a PhD mentor coming in. So around November and December, this is when you want to start sending final reminders to your mentors about writing letters of recommendation, finishing editing on your personal statement, hopefully getting as many fee waivers as possible. And it always helps if you submit the application a week before the deadline, just because you're going to be submitting a lot of these applications. You just want to make sure that you had plenty of time to look over them and you didn't necessarily like you don't want to wait a day up just because there might be several factors that could cause a delay. So at least for the biological sciences, what happens when you submit your grad school application? So if you have an interview, they will notify you anywhere between December and February. For the most part, you will hear by the end of February from the biology programs about an interview. Ideally, it should be honestly early February. If you did not hear back from any university, most likely you were not accepted or you were waitlisted once February hits. And in that case, you might want to consider either applying for research opportunities or a post-bac program. And keep in mind, grad school interview process is not an acceptance. However, schools do invite candidates they are interested in accepting, but they only have limited spots. So when I interview, for example, for the Yale molecular biochemistry and biophysics, I think they roughly send out 120, no, sorry, they send out roughly 60 interviews and only 30 were accepted. So keep in mind. And then if you're an international student, because it'll be difficult to fly you out in person, for the most part, you most likely have a Skype or phone interview. But because of COVID-19, a lot of these interview recruitment weekends most likely are going to be virtual. And sadly, program won't tell you if you've been rejected until end of March or April, and that's way too late. But just keep in mind, early February is when you should hear the latest. And now what's different is the non-biology programs, they actually don't have an interview process. They will pretty much notify you of an acceptance through email. And then after you have your official acceptance, that's when you're going to have the option for a visiting weekend or a virtual visit in this case. Yeah, so PhD programs, recruitment weekends, they're mostly virtual. And in short, they're going to happen anywhere from January to March. And this is kind of where you have the chance to learn more about their PhD program. You interview with different faculty members, interact with grad students, and pretty much learn if you are a good fit for the program and if their program is a good fit for you. And in terms of the official offers, after an interview, they range anywhere from a week up to a month, but the information includes on the stipend, depending on the program. Sometimes they include a moving stipend. In short, most PhD program decisions are due April 15. So, and that's when you have to accept the offer. If you already know that you're not gonna go to a particular PhD program, let's say 5 offers, definitely decline the other programs you are interested in. And definitely, yeah. And in terms of the actually grad school components, so in short, a basic grad school application consists of the online application that contains demographics, education. For the most part, they require a transcript, whether it's unofficial or official. Definitely check this out with the program you're applying to ahead of time, just because it takes time to send official transcripts to all these different universities. The CV and the resume, and the letter of recommendation, and lastly, the personal statement. So the letter of recommendation, once again, who exactly do you want to ask? You want to talk to faculty that can speak about your accomplishments, intellectual potential, motivation for study, mentors who have seen you grow as a professional and as a person, and they can speak about your potential to succeed in grad school as a scientist. You definitely want to ask research mentors who have known you very well, whether this includes your thesis, undergraduate thesis research mentor, department chair, faculty mentors, summer program research mentors, sometimes even research or honor program directors. And when it comes to the personal statement, in short, this is kind of where you highlight your scientific interests, your research experience, your professional goals, why are you applying to that program, and different biographical details. So in short, strong personal statements, you have your background and your motivation. How did you get interested in science? Why are you interested in that specific field? What research or relevant work experiences that you build up in this field? For example, if you're applying to neuroscience PhD programs, have you done research in neuroscience? What type of research have you done? What type of techniques have you learned? What type of experience did you build up in this field? And what did you learn through all these different research and personal experiences, and how they prepared you for grad school? And also, what do you want to do afterwards, your PhD? And remember in your personal statement, what exactly is the objective? Like, you're going to grad school because it's going to open a path to future careers that require skills learned from rigorous scientific training. So it's important to reflect and know why you want to go to grad school, as you're going to be there anywhere from 5 to 7 years. And that's something that you want to really highlight in your personal statement as to like your motivations for going to grad school. So also you want to mention the program. Like, I normally think of a personal statement breaking it down as the first paragraph is kind of like an abstract, but an abstract about you. Who are you as a scientist? why, what skills have I built up over these several years? Why am I interested into applying to this program? And then you have the body. The body is pretty much research experience 1 to 3. You talk about each research experience. And then the last program is a closing statement. And then here, the closing statement is once again, why are you a strong candidate for that PhD program? And leaning towards here, what is it about that PhD program that appeals to you? Why do you want to get your PhD at this institution? What is it about the research mentors that you're interested in working with? So if you had the time to meet with some of these professors ahead of time to talk about their research, if there's room in their lab, if you see yourselves working with them, if you apply to their PhD program, definitely if you feel a name drop them. If your research interest matches, if their research matches what you want to do with grad school. So definitely feel free to browse lab websites, see which faculty are in the program, just to get a sense of what labs you're interested in. And the lab you will join pretty much will have a big influence on your PhD journey. So definitely make sure you're just not applying to one lab. And when you're mentioning faculty members in your application, don't just name drop, like, let's say 5 different faculty members who you have never talked to, and the research interests all change different, like virology, biochemistry, neuroscience, microbiology. You kind of want to have like a underlying theme as to why you're interested in working, let's say, with these 3 different professors. Maybe they're all doing neuroscience, but what about it? Are they asking the same questions? Are they looking at, let's say, the modulation of neurocircuits, but maybe some are using a biochemical or genetic or cellular biology approach, and you're interested in all these labs because you better want to understand how neurocircuits are maintained or are developed. But, and that's why you want to work with these different professors. So you ideally want to have like an overlying team. And in your personal statement, you definitely want to be very honest. You kind of want to write your story to show your genuine scientific self. You want to avoid any metaphors or cliches, like pretty much like you kind of want to avoid generic sentences like science is cool, I love science, just because like your personal statement, the reader really wants to know who you are as an applicant. And definitely the more people that help you with your personal statement, the better. And you definitely, I personally like to avoid like, I want to go to, let's say, Rockefeller or Yale University because these are the best universities in the world. Like that's a generic statement that you are just like filling up space with, instead of writing those type of or like the professors there are like the best in the world in this field. Like you ideally, every sentence counts in your personal statements. You want to make sure it's either about you or your research interests. You want to make sure that you don't fluff up your personal statement with like irrelevant words. And then lastly, some tips on your personal statement. Definitely proofread several times. For example, what if you're applying to 10 PhD programs? You do not want to, like the last paragraph is pretty much what program you're applying to and why. You do not want to send, let's say, your Rockefeller personal statement, and in there you mention, this is why I want to go to Yale. So you definitely want to make sure that you have the right name of the program that you're applying to. Just because this does happen, you tend to apply for a lot of programs. And once again, your personal statement is you're not just highlighting everything on your resume. You're highlighting your research experiences and your experiences that are relevant to your personal statement. And lastly, you want to be very clear and concisely, just because some readers will skim the main parts. You want to have a very strong intro and a very strong closing. So definitely there's no room for irrelevant details. And lastly, you do not want to make excuses or focus on negative aspects. There are going to be things that need an explanation. For example, let's say you had a bad semester of not the best grades, or you had a really low GPA. Now, these are things that you definitely need to focus and talk about. You definitely don't want to ignore them in a personal statement. There are different approaches of tackling this. You can mention why exactly you had a low GPA, or you could have your letter writer mention this in their letter of recommendation. Just because overall you want to keep your personal statement very positive. So like instead of making excuses for not having the best GPA, you can talk about how you overcame obstacles. And despite And then that's great. You persisted in this field because you're passionate about this work. And if you're taking if you took gap years before you apply to a PhD program, you definitely want to explain why you're taking a gap years. So when it comes to like, let's say low GPA, low GRE, or several gap years in like non-research related activities, that's definitely things you want to highlight and address, whether you in your personal statement or in your faculty writes it in a letter of recommendation. And lastly, if you're interested in the Rockefeller PhD program, Emily Harms, who is the Senior Associate Dean for Graduate Studies at Rockefeller, definitely check out our Slack channel, specifically the Rockefeller Info Booth, if you want to learn more about this program. And with that, be happy to take any questions.
Thanks, Rob. Well, anyone who has one question can write in the Q&A feature. I think that there is one question it's from Carolina. She asks about a master's applications.
Sure.
Is it similar?
So this varies a lot. It really depends. If it's like, let's say, a master's program in the biological sciences, depending on the master's, you will need, it might be a master's where it's just, you're just taking coursework, or it might be a master's where you're actually doing a research. So for the master's program, you definitely, these are the same advice is applicable. However, it's very different in case of there are no recruitment weekends for master programs. Rather, sometimes you apply directly to certain labs and you just apply directly to that program. Keep in mind, master programs, you do not receive any stipend at all. You have to pay out of pocket for master programs for the tuition as well. Yeah.
Right. There is another question. How different are applying to programs abroad?
Sure. So I only apply to programs in the United States, but for those who will apply to programs abroad, for the most part, programs in Europe, at least they require a master's. And that's actually something that you need to keep in mind when applying to programs abroad. And their cycle is also very different. Sometimes they expect you to come in with your own funding. So when it comes to applying to programs abroad, you definitely want to do your homework. You also want to make sure that you're also applying to specific labs. You apply to specific labs, try to get your own funding. So those are just big differences in how applying programs abroad.
And do you have any specific advice for foreign students? Is the application process to a sandwich PhD different?
So if you're an international student, definitely take the TOEFL. That's pretty much mainly required at most universities. For international students, depending on which programs in the United States, there's limited funding for international students. So for example, I personally would suggest applying to more private universities that accept more international students rather than state schools that might have limited funding for international students. So one of the great things about Rockefeller is that it's very friendly for international students. They actually accept a lot of international students. So beyond Rockefeller, definitely apply to other private universities as well.
Great. In regards to the visitation weekends, do you have any advice for those who will be working a full-time job and communicating this with the programs?
Yes. So unfortunately, the programs are very, how do you say, they're very adamant that you have to be available during this entire weekend in order to be part of this experience. Pre-COVID, they would take you out. Like, let's say, like, okay, when I was interviewing, I went to school in New York. So they pretty much would fly me out, let's say, to, I mean, most of the schools I applied to the East Coast. or there was one in Duke University. So like, let's say they will fly me out to Duke, so I will have to kind of block that entire weekend. They definitely let you know ahead of time, like at least a month. But definitely, it's very like, it's you have to be there for the interview weekend, just because if you're not, your chances of getting in are going to be very, very low. So you kind of have to put, sadly, work aside. However, because it's virtual this year, if you're applying this year, and maybe it might be virtual next year as well, I think it might be a little bit more accommodating.
Good to know that. What do you think, what do you recommend for students who are applying to biomedical umbrella programs for the reason that we can explore different fields? Should we mention PIs?
Sure. So there are different approaches for that. If you're applying to biomedical umbrella program, and I pretty much did, you can necessarily apply, you can mention professors that have an underlying team. Like if you want to mention professors, make sure there is a central team. Like the question that all of these 5 different professors are answering are the same. Maybe they're in different fields or using different approaches, but the general team is the same. You just want to make sure you always have a connection to why exactly you're interested in these professors. If you are, or maybe you're just like, for example, in general, when I applied for some of these umbrella programs, at the time I was interested in neurodegenerative disorders. And when I put down some professors were studying Alzheimer's in mice. Some professors were not necessarily studying Alzheimer's, but they were studying depression, and specifically how neurotransmitters regulate neurocircuitry in a very simple organism. And other professors were testing growth compounds to prevent the accumulation of some of these amyloid beta proteins. So I kind of tried, even though like, and they were doing biochemical stuff. So everyone, even though with the professors in my case were like mice field, C. elegans, and last one was just like in vitro stuff, I did my best to try to have a central team. Like I was interested in all those professors, but the overall team was that I wanted to study neurodegenerative disorders, or how improper modulation of neurocircuits leads to different diseases.
There's one question. Daisha says, what are the conferences that you said we should attend for the application fee waivers? Can you tell us more about those?
Sure. So it's called Annual Biomedical Research for Minority Students. It's called ABRCM, ABRCMS. So if you definitely type that in, you should be able to find it. And the other is just SACNIS, the National Diversity in STEM Conference in 20. Let me see if I could find a chat. So it's ABRCM and SACNIS. So definitely you should be able to find us online. Okay. I think we got a couple more questions. So how many years of research experience do PhD programs prefer us to have? So I would say that really varies depending on the PhD program. Ideally, 2 years, anywhere from 1.5 years to 2 years. When I applied, I roughly had 1.5 years in a summer research program. So there might be cases where you only have summer research program experiences, and maybe because your university doesn't have any research labs, and that's totally fine as long as you explain the absence of consistent research experience in your application. But ideally, like around 1.5 years.
Yeah, and if you don't have the PI names, how should you still put them in your personal statement?
So for the PI names, pretty much when you submit your personal statement, it's up to you if you want to, I know people who necessarily haven't necessarily put professors they're interested in working with in a personal statement, and that's totally fine. That's really up to you, whether you want to uh, apply, put them down or not. It just makes it seem like you've done your homework in a university or department as to why exactly you want to go there. So even if you don't know what labs you want to join, that's fine. Just what labs are you interested in working with, or what labs are interesting to you? So that's something I recommend.
Great. There is one question. It says about I was accepted to 2 reuse last semester, but they were canceled. Do I still mention them in my application?
Sure. So I definitely recommend you do mention it in your application because you were accepted into that program. But maybe you want to add a disclaimer that even though you were accepted into that program, due to COVID-19, this RU was canceled even though I was accepted. This is something that's going to be very common this year because of pretty much COVID-19.
Okay. We still don't have questions. We'll have one more question. So it says, I took a gap year, but it was not productive due to COVID until recently. How do you suggest I bring this up? Should I have my LOE writer address to it?
So keep in mind, like everyone is going through this pandemic right now. So a lot of the admissions committee will understand that there are students whose summer research programs were canceled, students who were not able to go back to the research labs. I know some undergraduate students, even though the campuses are open limitedly, they cannot go to research labs at all, and maybe not for the entire year. So that's something that's happening right now. And that's something that the admissions committee will be understandable as long as you mention it that, like, look, you were doing research for a year. Even though you did research, it was limited because of COVID-19. That's fine. You could bring it up. Your PI can bring it up. But I would not worry about it just because this is something that's happening to all of us, and they will be understanding of that.
The next question is about working on campus. It says, if I was going to start to work with a PA, but labs on campus are closed due to COVID, could I bring that up? I'm a junior and I will be here to find other research opportunities.
Yeah, that's a good point. So I know that that's happened to a couple of students as well, unfortunately. You can definitely bring it up that you were going to start working in a particular lab, but because of COVID-19, you weren't able to. As long as you mention that, like you mentioned the specifics explicitly, like don't say that you did research in a year in a lab where you did not do research. Just say that you were going to, but because of COVID-19, you weren't able to do research. However, because of COVID-19, there are some cases where some professors are trying to do virtual research opportunities. So maybe you necessarily can't go to that lab. Maybe you could do a literature search on the research done in that laboratory. Or maybe there are some computational techniques that you could learn. So those are just some ways of like trying to get around not being able to physically go to lab. But the other thing is keep in mind, even if you don't build up your research experience as an undergraduate student, that's fine. You can apply for lab technician jobs, post-grad jobs, where you do paid research for a year or two, you build up experience, and then you apply to grad school. There are also post-bac programs you could apply for after you finish your college degree to build up more experience. Just don't think just because you do not have ample research experience because of your undergrad time that you cannot apply to a PhD program. You can always build up more experience.
Uh, we still don't have questions, but in the case of international students, how do they can access to these postbac opportunities?
Sure. So actually, let me send something through the chat. Just 1 second. So unfortunately, at the moment, most post-bac programs that I know of are restricted to U.S. citizens or permanent residents. However, there may be some exceptions. So this is just our website, scientificolatino.com. And this specific page are some post-bac programs. Some may be eligible for international students. This is something that a few programs are doing right now. But once again, a lot of the programs for postbacs are due anywhere from end of December to early February. So we'll be updating this list in a few months. But if you're not eligible for a postbac, you could still, if you have a visa, you could still build up research experience as a research assistant.
For international students, do you suggest that they employ some extra time for having publications because they have some maybe disadvantage for not being able to have experience in renowned universities? Maybe. Do you think that?
So in general, for international students, definitely you kind of like this whole application process. You definitely want to prepare at least a year in advance, just because beyond, like, there are certain things beyond the application that you need to focus on, including like immunizations and visas. But if you're an international student, definitely, let me send something else to the chat. 1 second. Because we made a guide for international students, and these are just some topics to keep in mind when applying to graduate programs as an international student. Okay, so I just sent in the chat, and it's just like detailed information on like a timeline on applying to grad school, international student, and specific nuances that you need to be aware of. But definitely, as an international student applicant, I would recommend applying to more private programs. See if you could build up your resume, whether it's publications or research experience, talking to professors ahead of time, making sure there are spaces in their lab of interest if they're interested in you as a candidate as well. Okay, I think we could probably.
Yes. Yes, I think we have answered all the questions. Thank you, Rob, for all your knowledge that you have shared in this session. I think it's very helpful for all the possible prospective students for the PhD or master program.
Great, thank you for having me, and everyone, good luck with your grad school application applications this fall or in the future. Everyone.